voice of the Louisville Cardinals. Paul Rogers, our guest on the show. Paul, great to have you on. How are you today?
Doing well. Looking forward to the game.
Yeah, as are we. These two teams are in different places right now. So let's talk a little bit about Louisville to start this thing off. And, Louisville's had 3 really tough seasons in a row, and here comes Pat Kelsey in, and it looks like he's had the magic potion. He's turned this thing around. They're 12-5 right now, and among the league leaders in the ACC. Well, let's start with Pat Kelsey. What has he done to turn this program around so quickly?
Well, when he took the job, he said he was going to start the revival, as he called it. And indeed he did. He just has this boundless energy. That's what you read about and hear about when you first come in contact with him, and it's legit. The guy never stops. And he has recruited players that buy into that energy level. He has recruited players who are veterans who all came pretty much from successful programs. And they have blended together just amazingly. I was stunned. They took a summer trip to the Bahamas, and we broadcast 2 games back in July. Now, the competition was nothing to fear, but you could just see his plan and his style of attack and how entertaining this basketball team was going to be. And they have far exceeded most people's expectations, mainly because Louisville had just gone so far down, and you didn't know how quickly you could recover from that. But this team has absolutely no connection to those last few teams. Not a player, not a coach has been a part of that. So it's a whole brand new thing, and they have put it together and put together this recent 6-game winning streak. They're 12-5. Their 5 losses were all to ranked teams. They played very well in losses to Kentucky and Duke. So it's got the Louisville fans excited again, and boy, did they ever need it, because they have really been down in the dumps the last few years.
That's what I was going to ask you, because Syracuse is kind of in a similar situation. They haven't made the tournament in 5 years, and it hasn't gotten as bad as it did at Louisville. Is it sustainable right now with the transfer portal for Louisville to get back to where they were?
I think it is, and I'm not a fan of the transfer portal. I don't know how many people are, or NIL, or all that stuff, but that's what it is anymore. It's not going to change. So you got to adapt and learn how to play that way, and Kelsey does. When he went out with this team together, I mean, he's really big on analytics, and he needed this piece to go here and this guy to do that, and he went right down the roster and filled every spot. And I don't think there's any reason he can't continue to do that. And there's a good chance that a fair number of these guys will be able to come back next year. So I think he's a guy who is a modern coach. He understands this is the game we're in now, and he will do whatever it takes to get the good players in here. Now, there's always going to be an economical factor. Can you pay this guy as much as somebody else wants to pay him? That's always going to be an issue. But I think Louisville this year certainly has shown the ability to keep pace.
Let's talk about some of those good players. 5 guys averaging in double figures right now. From a personnel perspective, who should Syracuse fans be most concerned about tonight?
Well, it always begins with a point guard, and boy, they got to go to him from Wisconsin. Chucky Hepburn has come in. He leads the team in scoring and assists. He's among the nation's leaders in steals. He's an unselfish player, but he can score. As I said, he's leading them 15 points per game, but distributing the ball is his main thing. And then there hasn't been a game that somebody hasn't come up big. You never know who it's going to be. At Pittsburgh Saturday, Rain Smith, who's as good a shooter as I've ever seen at Louisville, poured in 7 of 11 threes. The game before, Javon Hadley had poured in 32 points. In a game, James Scott had a string of 20-point, or not James Scott, excuse me, Terrence Edwards had a string of 20-point games. James Scott is a very talented sophomore who came with Coach Gels from Charleston. He's great around the rim. He's among the nation's leaders in dunks. Just everybody they put on the floor has come through. There's even one for the only freshman on the team, a guy named Kenai Ruth. Doesn't have big numbers, but he comes in and he contributes. Frank Anselmibe, who played here at Syracuse a couple of years, comes in. He might play only 2 or 3 minutes, but he'll get a rebound, he'll get an assist, he'll set a good pick. Everybody comes in and contributes, and that's 25 strong is Pat Kelsey's mantra, and it goes all the way through the players, the managers, the support staff, everybody. Not sure it includes the play-by-play announcer. I haven't quite cracked top 25 yet, but we're trying.
Paul, I do want to ask you about the ACC as a whole, and Paulie and I were talking about this yesterday on the show, that it feels like it's Duke, and then there's a drop-off to that next tier. Do you agree with that, number one? And number two, where does Louisville fit into the pecking order in your mind? I assume they're in that next tier. If you kind of had to rank the top, 3 to 5 teams in this conference, where's Louisville fall?
Well, you're right. It's Duke and everybody else, and Louisville is climbing up the everybody else ladder. For a while now, I've been saying I think Louisville could be in that middle tier group, and based on where they are now, they're in second place, and frankly, they've played the toughest part of their schedule. So I feel like Louisville is right there in that next tier, and it's a weird year. It's hard to fathom the ACC having only one ranked team, but that's what you've got right now. I think Duke is clearly the best. I still think Carolina potentially is good. I still think Pittsburgh is potentially good. Clemson is pretty solid, and right now Louisville, I think, is in that group.
All right, let's talk about Syracuse if we could, as you got ready to call this game tonight. It's a Syracuse team. Syracuse team that's 8-8 overall, 2-3 in conference play. As you know, they were without J.J. Starling for 7 games. They get him back, and just as they get him back, Donnie Freeman goes out. What do you make of this Syracuse team? And I guess from a Louisville perspective, what concerns you most about this Syracuse team heading into tonight?
Well, you touched on the first two things that jump at you. Is they're a lot better when J.J. Starling's in the lineup, and they're probably a lot better when Donnie Freeman's in the lineup. And I guess it's still up in the air as to whether he'll be back. I know he's been in a boot, and I get mixed messages on that. Sometimes a guy they wear a boot just for protective measures. It's nothing more than that. Now I think apparently he is more serious than that. So I don't know. I'm sure they'd love to have him. Beyond that, Eddie Lampkin, your big center, 6'11", 265. That's a load. Louisville is fairly tall, but they're not very big in that regard. James Scott's 6'11", but 210. Noah Waterman's 6'11", but he's been playing with their thumb. So anyway, Lampkin is a concern, and obviously Starling is. He's just so good with the ball, and he's got such an array of moves. Defending him is always going to be tricky. And then it would help if Chris Bell doesn't go off for 8 out of 10 threes like he did last year in that game here. I'm haunted by his last one. He was as open as from me to the other side of my hotel room, and how that could happen. And he had to hit that late three. But, you never know. I know Syracuse doesn't shoot threes that well overall, but you just don't know when a team is going to go off. Louisville, even though they shoot a lot of threes, frankly, their percentage has not been great. But occasionally they do. They hit 15 out of 29 at Florida State. You have games like that pop up for anybody, and if Syracuse were to do that tonight, then suddenly that creates a whole new problem.
Yeah, and along those lines, you mentioned Syracuse has not shot the three well this year. They have not taken care of the basketball of late, although they did a better job in this last game against Boston College. So those are some of the areas of weakness for the Orange. For Louisville, what is their, if you had to point to, this is their biggest area of weakness, what would it be?
Boy, I'll tell you what, it's hard for me to pick one out. Not that they're overpowering in every regard, but they've just been good across the board. They're solid defensively. As I said, they aren't shooting the three great, but they do make a lot of them and are capable of making them. They're adjustable. They can play fast or slow. They beat Virginia by 20. They had never won in that building, and I was in disbelief that whole game because Louisville just has a hard time with Virginia, who frankly is not the Virginia of old, but still it's been a challenge for Louisville. So they've been versatile. They've won close games. In fact, they've won 2 close games against 2 of the weaker teams on their schedule. So, but when they've gotten in the clutch in close games, they did it Saturday at Pittsburgh. They always seem to make the play that's needed.
All right, and then let's look at tonight's game. And I always like to get a prediction. You don't necessarily have to give me a score, but how do you see this game playing itself out tonight?
I think both these teams like to get up and down. I know Louisville does. Does Syracuse go out of the way to maybe try and slow them down a little bit? I don't know. They're pretty close. Louisville's averaging 78. Syracuse averages 75. I think it'll be a pretty fast-paced game. I think Louisville has been a surprisingly good rebounding team for not being. They got decent size, but not the real strong size. And the other thing, they've been good at the foul line. Now, unfortunately, they won anyway, but they did not hit their free throws very well at Pittsburgh. But going into that game, in the winning streak, they had a huge advantage in getting to the free throw line, and that's something they will try to do. And if they do, that could be a big problem for whoever they're playing.
All right, Paul, 7 o'clock tip tonight inside the Dome. We appreciate the time as always, and thanks for coming on. Have a great broadcast tonight.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, Paul Rogers, voice of the Louisville Cardinals. And with that, we're going to hit a timeout. We'll open up the phone lines if you want to check in. Phone lines open until 1:30 when we bring Jim Coventry on 315-437-7640.